How is it that we go about figuring out what we need to put together, what the pieces are to create a new type of third space, one that represents your vision, your values, is something that the people you want to bring in are attracted to in a very natural way to really create this sort of ecology and this community that really builds on itself, but also while working as a very good business? So much of it to me has to do with the way that we define success. How are we balancing the opposites to determine success in your context? And so much of that to me has to do with intent. Are you trying to make something that's sweet, something that's savory? What are the ingredients we're going to be using to be creating this vision that you have? What are the things that we do when we put them together? How do we mix it? What are the techniques we use? How do we actually bake this thing? And we can set up structures or frameworks to evaluate these things. So, just as, say, a public or a nonprofit may have different priorities than, say, private equity, where, private equity may be a more of a short term, sort of self interested, profit driven business compared to something that's much more generational, where it might be a longer term, sort of service oriented exploration of your interests, community focused. It's not that all of these things are the same for every business, but the point is we can define by discussion and narrative what your priorities are. And we can do the same thing when it comes to what actually is going in the facility. So, how much are you interested in the sort of community aspect of what we're doing? Or are you more interested in other things like the technology aspect, how you integrate technology? Or, how are we creating sustainable profit? So, not just profit for profit's sake, but a long term sustainable profit that allows us to sort of choose our own destiny over the long period of time. What are the things you're thinking about when it comes to work? What is it? What's your version of play? What are the activities themselves that bring people into your facility? What's our view on education? What's our view on the sort of green technology? These are just aspects that in my projects are often coming up as talking points where every project is touching on them, generally speaking, but what's your focus? Where are you weighting it? Because it's not the same in every project, and it's not the same level of interest in all of these different aspects in every project. So we can define and sort of create a fingerprint for different projects based on what your priorities are, where you want to spend your money, and what your interests are. So just as some examples, if we were to look at, say, private equity or a sort of profit oriented climbing facility, it's probably, yes, they're interested in community. Yes, they're interested in climbing. Yes, they're interested in profit. Yes, they're interested maybe, and they've got some co-working or whatever, but is any of it really being developed to a high level? If you look at something like this, I would say not really. None of this is really hitting the mark on any of those being done extremely well. So that's why, maybe the sort of ambition is being shown in the fingerprint of this sort of blue coverage of this diagram, this framework. Where if you look at more of a, say, a generational climbing gym where it's like really coming from a real passion and a desire to build community, it starts to involve other things that are showing up in the facility itself. So, this is a brand where they've got, cafes and bars and lounge seating. And it really has this sort of community atmosphere that I think is what is showing up in the coverage of this framework, where there's a lot of attention to the play aspect. They're really caring about, the climbing aspect probably a little bit more. They're really caring about providing community space. They're really caring about, the sort of lounge and the workspace aspect of it. So some of these areas start to get more coverage. And I think that shows very specifically in the way that the spaces are put together. And in one of my projects, I can certainly say that where there was a lot of space dedicated for things like co-working, for events to be happening, space that is not returning a specific ROI per square foot, but giving you opportunity to do other things. And other clients that I have, one group is a daycare co-working fitness group. And so, their focus on education is clear. They're a school. They're focused on community. They're bringing parents and kids together and supporting each other in that sort of live and work way. So this is a really good example of a third space where they're combining these things, but in a way that it's not like a Google office where you have to be there. You are choosing to be a part of this community, have your kids there, be able to use the workspace. So there's a lot of emphasis on play. This sort of et cetera is kind of the open-ended aspect. For some people, it might be food. For some people, it might be other things. And then, sustainable profit. There's investment going on. So we don't want to pretend that that's not important, but how we go about it is what's important. And so in this case, the actual models we put together illustrate these priorities. And that's how we know that this fingerprint, it has to be singing the same tune in the actual building itself. Or in larger, multi-use community-oriented developments, which is sort of a mouthful, but it's the best way I could describe it, because projects like this that are combining different Olympic sports, things like climbing, skateboarding, surfing, housing, park, all these different things are showing up in this prioritization. So yes, it needs to be sustainably profitable. It has these other uses. It has a strong emphasis on play and a strong emphasis on community. And so that sort of a fingerprint is showing up in this type of image in my mind. So when you look at the combination of the funding side on the left, what are the priorities with the funding aspect? Where's the money coming from? What are your obligations to the money? What are your investors expecting? That has a huge impact on how you develop a project. And then what goes into the project? How are you focusing on community versus play versus, profit versus work and technology? What is your position on all of these different things? That's what this fingerprint in combination is really helping us understand. And to me, this kind of a fingerprint is very different than this kind of a fingerprint, where if you're a private equity group who is much more interested in, the reality is probably a few people are going to make a lot of money, and it's questionable how many other people do. And it's highly likely that you may actually go bankrupt. The numbers behind private equity or capital restructuring are not necessarily great in the long run for the people who start these businesses. And what is the ambition around the facility itself as a result? How much are you willing to invest in community? How much are you willing to invest and spend extra money on, say, green technology or, better workspaces or the technology aspect of the facility itself? Whatever it is, how much are you willing to invest if you have much more of a short-term prioritization on money? So to me, when it comes to putting a project together that is trying to be the third space for people, that third space plus, it's the fingerprint that we identify, which is truly unique to every owner, whether or not they even realize it or not. We talk about mindset, we talk about goals, we talk about vision, we talk about the specific ingredients that they actually care about, whether it's climbing, skateboarding, workspaces, daycare, co-working. It doesn't matter what it is, because the combination of those things is what we need to put together to create your unique fingerprint as a business that is a good business with the space that supports it, and they all need to sing the same tune. And if we can do that, that's how we put a space together that can be the next version of a third space. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.